Hello and welcome to our broadcast, Exploring Implicit Bias in the History Social Science Classroom. My name is Michelle Herzog. I'm the History Social Science Coordinator 3 for the Los Angeles County Office of Education. We are here today with Module 3 of this three-part series, Exploring Ethnic Transformations in California. If you watched earlier, we were in Module 1, which started with Inquiry in Ethnic Studies with Michael Sabet. Took us through the dimensions of inquiry-driven instruction, particularly for ethnic studies. Module 2 with Sandra Line talked about developing the mindsets, skill sets for exploring bias in the classroom. And now I'm very happy to introduce Module 3 to you on exploring the ethnic transformations of California. Part 1 is going to be focused on We Are Still Here, Ethnic California. Part 2 will focus on California's past, transformative resistance. Part 3 will focus on California present, on critical hope. Part 4 will be around California's future, on radical healing. It's going to be a wonderful 4-part series. So I'm very thrilled and honored to have my good friend and colleague, Barbara Vallejo Doughton, with me. She is an extraordinary teacher from Long Beach and LA Unified. She's many years in the classroom and is also the director of the California Global Education Project at Cal State Long Beach. So Barb, thank you for joining us and all your hard work in putting this together.
Thank you, Michelle. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to start off with the guiding values and principles of the Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum that was just passed in 2021 for the state of California that kind of frames this work. And so just to read a little bit from it. According to the values and principles, ethnic studies connects ourselves to past and contemporary social movements that struggle for social justice and an equitable and democratic society, and conceptualizes, imagines, and builds new possibilities for a post-racist, post-systemic racist society that promotes collective narratives, and here's where I got the themes for this module: transformative resistance, critical hope, and radical healing.
Great.
So to go over some of the key vocabulary, so what do we mean by transformative resistance, critical hope, and radical healing? And this is obtained from the Berkeley site, and this is kind of what frames the work. So when we talk about transformative resistance, we're really asking the question, how do communities of color grapple with identity and positionality to address complex issues and processes to disrupt inequalities? When we talk about critical hope, we're talking about the features of a just society and how communities of color have articulated that justice. And when we speak about radical healing, we are envisioning a new opportunity for healing while equipping students with change-making tools of empowerment. So these are the themes that are going to come up in the next 3 or 4 parts of this module. And so the benefits of ethnic studies, many of my colleagues are struggling with this because they think that just by doing real history, that we're going to get to the guiding principles and values that this model curriculum so adeptly demonstrates. So just to read a little bit from that document, there's a considerable research evidence that well-designed and well-taught ethnic studies curricula have positive academic and social outcomes for students. Curricula are designed and taught somewhat differently depending on the ethnic composition of the class or school and the subsequent experience students bring. But both students of color and white students have been found to benefit from ethnic studies. Everything from more attendance to classroom, a higher graduation rate, and that is from Christine Cedar, cited in the model curriculum.
Yeah, those are some really good points, that it goes beyond just a history lesson.
Right.
There's some other great benefits, like you mentioned, with attendance, academic achievement. It's nice to have that research as rationale for that.
Yeah. And it's powerful research because it gives the opportunity for teachers to really look in their communities and say, okay, what can I bring from the community to make my teaching more relevant?
And Sandra Line talked a lot about that in Module 2.
In Module 2,
yeah.
yes.
So we need to keep re-emphasizing that, and you're going to speak to that some more,
Absolutely. Just to reiterate the 4 foundational disciplines. So in the model curriculum, they highlight specific ethnic groups: African American, Chicano and Latinx, Native American, Asian American, and Pacific Islander. That's not to say that these are the only groups to be explored, but these are the foundational disciplines is what they're called.
And the whole idea of intersectionality is a big big part of the model curriculum to think about too. We talked a lot about that in Module 2 on identity. We're so many things than just race.
Right. And we're going to explore that intersectionality, diversity aspect of California in a minute.
Good.
But given California's diversity, since we're talking about that, each community has its own ethnic makeup, and each demographic group has its own unique history and struggles and contributions to our state. The foundational disciplines affords local educational agencies the flexibility to adopt the curriculum to address the demographics and diversity of the classroom. So this subtitle of this part is called We Are Still Here.
Yeah, why that title?
Because California has a rich and diverse history, beginning with the native peoples who came much earlier than the Europeans, but also the mixture of the groups that did come over time has always been part of our history, yet the narratives of those groups hasn't been really discussed or expanded upon, as I think, and I think the state would agree, should have been. So when we talk about a state of diversity, an exceptional feature of California is that ethnic diversity is not isolated to one particular city or region. With the exception of the 2 least populated regions in the state, every region of California is more racially and ethnically diverse than the nation as a whole.
That's a lot to think about.
So California is leading the way again, not
Yes.
only the 5th or 6th largest economy in the
Yes.
world, but the most diverse state in the nation.
Yes, and when you travel around the United States, you really start to notice that, don't you?
Right,
Yeah, we're
right.
used to it here, those of us that have grown up in California.
And I think we take it for granted.
Yes.
The richness and the positive contributions that this diversity affords us. So looking at this data county by county and how diverse each county is, we can see, and this is from the census data of 2020, the darker color green indicates the higher level of diversity. So in the dark greens, you can see 65% or more people who live in that county are diverse, and all the way up to less than 35%, which you can see is just a very small part of the state. So when we talk about ethnic studies, it's not just ethnic studies in the large urban areas like LA and San Diego and San Francisco. It's ethnic studies statewide is what really needs to happen.
But it does look like most of the diversity are in those urban settings.
Yes, most of them are.
But the rural settings will benefit too from ethnic studies and understanding.
Exactly. It's not just talking about the 4 foundational disciplines because
Right.
you happen to have African Americans or Latinx children in your classroom. No. If you, as you see, the trends of diversity in California and the nation are trending towards more diverse groups, it affords us to say everyone should have this knowledge.
Yes.
And this is just another example of how you can look at the data points around diversity. And the green meaning I think Latino population is almost 40% of the state. 40% of what it was our population, 33 or 35 million people. That's a lot of people who have this background, who are your doctors, who are your, grocery workers, who are everything in between. And so to understand the history of the people and to be able to engage with them in respectful and civil ways is so important. And I think that's the work of our educational system.
And this is from 2020.
This is from
so
2020.
I'm guessing those numbers are changing as we speak. We see a lot of folks leaving California, but a lot more immigrants coming in
Right.
from Mexico, Central America.
Right.
And they're not a homogenous group either.
No, and we'll talk about how identity and positionality has impacted how we look at these groups.
Yes. Okay, great.
Okay, so this is a space to stop and pause. If the state is so diverse, this is an opportunity for schools and districts to raise a couple of questions. What is the state of diversity at your school and community? And I know in Module 2, Sandy Line talked about that.
Yeah.
And we're going to look at it in a slightly different way. But another question to ask is, what are the implications as you move forward with designing an ethnic studies program? So if you don't have that information about your community and you don't really know what your community is about in terms of the ethnic diversity, that's going to really limit the impact of ethnic studies in your school. So we're looking at a picture, and this is from the Central Valley. And as I did the research for this module, I noticed that there are a lot of Muslim immigrants into the Central Valley. So when you look at this picture, and I thought about this question, how has the social, political, and economic landscape of my school community change over time? What has been the impact of these immigrants, and some of them refugees, on the social, political, and economic aspects of my community, and how do I engage in that? So in the model curriculum, throughout the model curriculum, they talk about how community and bringing the community into the classroom is so important. So I have adapted a worksheet for educators to help them explore the community in maybe slightly different ways than what was presented in Module 2. I know that in that module, they're looking at things like, where are the health services located in your community? Where are the stores and the retail located in your community? I want to go a little deeper in this because identity and the positionality of these immigrants in your community matters. And so part of the process of that could be a little survey like this. What is the name of your community? And how did that community acquire that name? If we look around California, many of the communities and cities were named after ranchos, right? So for example, Rancho Los Cerritos is now the city of Cerritos. Or Cerritos. So
Pico Rivera,
where I was from. Yes, you know my story. So to know the origin and how it came to be and what that means and how it still impacts how that community is seen and how it's thriving or not is very important. So this is just a tool. You may look at some of the economic sectors that support the community. How accessible are they? If there are health centers that are on one side of the community, how do the members of that community from the opposite end get access to that, especially if they don't have transportation? So looking at things like that really helps you to understand the community where you serve, because like it or not, know it or not, the community where you serve is always in your classroom. It's going to show up in very different ways. And to understand what that is and how that works is only beneficial for both teacher and student. One of the other ways to look at how you can understand and support your community is to help students figure out, okay, my community exists on a geographic plane, but what else is there? And how is that geographic plane impacting my community? So students might, for example, create a story map using Google Maps where they pin various aspects of their community and they indicate this is where recreational spaces are, or this is where we go on Sunday afternoons to have our picnics with our family for a quinceañera or a baptism or whatever celebration they may have. The teacher might assign them to create a short story, interview a family member, create a short story about their experience, and bring all that richness back to the classroom so that the teacher and the students all understand that there's a multitude of perspectives and heritages here.
From their own families.
Right
and I
from their
love
own
this
family.
because so many times those stories are lost. They're not passed down. I think I mentioned this in another module. We know the story of Karen Korematsu, the daughter of Fred Korematsu, who brought the case of Japanese internment all the way to the Supreme Court. She never learned about it till she went to school and studied it in school and went home and go, what is this, right? But there's so much richness in talking to parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. I'm glad you emphasize that.
Yes.
It's a great resource that's untouched.
And just to give a more personal account, when I was about 11 or 12, my father took me to a grocery store and they were boycotting grapes. And I didn't know the man who was there was Cesar Chavez.
Oh, really?
Really.
At the store?
At the store.
Oh, heavens.
I didn't know that until college, when then I took other courses and I learned about the boycott. And I'm like, that's the man that was at the store when my father and I went to go buy groceries, and we did not buy grapes. But see, those kinds of stories that make connection to the American experience that are not being told in the classroom. So this is the opportunity to do that.
That's wonderful. Okay, this is a great tool. Thank you for providing that. I know they can find it on the website where they find this presentation, the video. And it brings up the whole idea about the dynamics and identities and shape of students' mindsets for their own identities as well. And I would imagine that how long students have lived in their community and the community they came from would also be important information to know.
Right. Our society is so fluid. You know, people move a lot more than I think we used to. You know, my parents, my mom still lives in the same community where I was raised, so she bought that house in 1959. That's not true for many of our students. They're very mobile. So the ability to honor their stories wherever they go and wherever they come from is so critical to helping learning more relevant and meaningful in the 21st century, right? The other part of the model curriculum talks about guiding values and principles, and I know that that was reviewed in Module 1 or 2, but just to reiterate, there's a lot of emphasis again on bringing the community in.
Yes.
And there's emphasis on cultivating empathy and how that shows up in the classroom. And I think bringing in the stories and hearing each other's stories does that to a large degree. It puts a high value on learning about the pre-colonial ancestral knowledge and the narratives and communal experiences of Native people and people of color in the BIPOC community. So it provides that space to be, it's okay to be who you are and not to try to be or to assimilate into something that maybe you're not, right? And so one of the questions that schools and districts I think need to ask themselves vis-a-vis the guiding values and principles and who's in the room is which of the values and principles appear in your curriculum and which might need more attention. So with the model curriculum, it's vast. And I hope teachers and school districts aren't overwhelmed with, wow, this is a lot. But if we just start, pick a few themes, start working on a few of those guiding values and principles and work consistently towards what I think is a more social justice and equitable educational experience for our students in the community we serve. I think that is what this model curriculum can do and help districts move forward in that way.
And you know, there's a lot of options for districts to meet the high school graduation requirement. You can have a standalone course, you can integrate it into other content area courses, as long as the ethnic studies is the focus. But in either position, I think you're right. Coming back, using that model curriculum as guidance is really a powerful tool, and that's why we're referencing it so much in these modules too, to remind folks. It's a big document, it's over 350 pages,
Right.
But keep that close to you when you're starting to think about how to roll out your programming.
And I know that the county office is doing a wonderful job in providing those opportunities of showing different formats of how this might look, because this is new territory for us,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And in some communities, it can be very threatening,
Yes.
right? But in the model curriculum, I think it summarizes what we're talking about. Ethnic studies can become a venue for developing a deeper understanding of the opportunities and challenges that come with ethnic diversity. It furthers a sense of human commonality.
Yes.
In this way, ethnic studies can help build stronger communities, a more equitable, inclusive state, and a more just nation.
Yes. I keep coming back to the old adage, e pluribus unum. Out of many, we are one. We can be one America, but we can also recognize, respect, and look at the plurality, the diversity as assets, as ways that make us all stronger.
Right. And we'll talk about those assets in the second part when we look at our community as assets and what students bring to the classroom as assets.
Yes.
But what does that look like in a K-12 environment? Because I know that's
where we live.
That's where we live. So if ethnic studies highlights the importance of untold stories and emphasizes the danger of a single story, schools and districts and communities have to ask themselves, what are those single stories that we have in our community that reduce people to stereotypes and deny their humanity? And if an ethnic community has its own unique history, struggles, and contributions, then how are these unique histories taught? How are they understood? And how are they celebrated from the perspective of the marginalized groups? So these are really key points and questions to ponder and to really grapple with before starting an ethnic studies program.
And our modules are mainly, of course, focused on the history social science classroom. But if you think about this in an English literature course and the types of books you're reading, how to frame them, I think all of this applies to that as well.
Well, I would even say that even in a class like science, how is knowledge constructed? Is knowledge only constructed in one way, or are there different ways of constructing knowledge? And then opening up that platform to have people from different ethnic groups talk about how knowledge is constructed in their culture.
Well, you could talk about it too in science around medicine. That opens up a whole discussion, right? Because it's a very westernized approach.
Yes.
But we know that Asian American Pacific Islanders have different approaches to medicinal herbs and things. Native peoples have things. But what do we value? What do we not in the mainstream? Is there value in those other approaches? Right?
Right, and it's interesting too because as a Latina, we always have Savila, which is aloe vera. And aloe vera has come now on the market for everything, for wrinkles, for sores, for wounds, for sunburns, right? And my grandmother always used to talk about that, cutting the aloe vera leaf and just rubbing it for sunburn. And other people thought, oh, that's not what, you go to the store and you buy
and you spend money and buy yes.
Right? Different ways of constructing knowledge.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. That's a whole nother course.
It's a whole nother course. So in the end, what steps could your department, school, or district take towards building a greater awareness and understanding of these key values by exploring some of the things that we just talked about? That's the excitement of this opportunity that we have to make education relevant and meaningful for all students.
Okay. Well, I'm really glad you're taking us to this next place. It's a great ending to our series of modules, and we're going to get into those 3 concepts that you pulled from the model curriculum. Those are fascinating. I love the way they're framed. So tell us a little bit about our next part 2.
So our part 2 is going to be on transformative resistance, or looking at the ways that ethnic communities have positioned their identity and how they position themselves in the community in order to address critical issues and processes to go towards a more equitable society.
Transformative
resistance.
What a great term. We really want to unpack that and
We
learn
will.
some more. So that's great. Because yes, ethnic studies needs to talk about, of course, stories of discrimination, stories of oppression, but also stories of resilience and contributions. So all of that's going to be covered in, I know, the next 3 parts.
Yes, it will. And we're going to be pairing a couple of the foundational disciplines with each of the themes.
Yes.
So it's really applying the theory, so to speak, with the actual lessons that are in the model curriculum.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Well, thanks, Barb, for kicking off part 1. We'll see you back in part 2.
Thank you.
Thank you.